On a sunny afternoon in a small southern town, 13-year-old Jasmine Cooper sets up a lemonade stand in the innocent hopes of raising money for a summer camp. But when the town's racist police chief, Frank Mercer, arrests her for selling lemonade without a permit, an act of childish ambition turns into a battle that will unravel deep-seated prejudices, personal vendettas, and buried secrets. Jasmine's father, Damon Cooper, is no ordinary man. A successful civil rights attorney who fled the town years ago to escape its toxic racism, Damon is forced to confront the very system that once targeted him. But this legal battle isn't just about justice, it's personal. Unbeknownst to Mercer, Damon once shared a bond with Mercer's late wife, a connection that threatens to unravel Mercer's deeply held worldview. As tensions rise and the courtroom drama unfolds, both men are forced to confront their pasts. Jasmine's fight for freedom becomes a reckoning for the town itself, with both sides forced to ask, what is the true cost of hate? Bitter Lemonade is a powerful tale of love, loss, and redemption in a community divided by prejudice. In a town where justice is fragile and secrets hold power, one family's fight could change everything, if it's not too late. On the sunny streets of a small southern town, 13-year-old Jasmine Cooper sets up a lemonade stand to earn money for summer camp. But when police chief Frank Mercer, a man notorious for his racist views, arrests her for illegal sales, the town is thrown into an uproar. What should have been a simple, innocent moment becomes the tipping point for a deep-rooted divide in the community. Unbeknownst to Chief Mercer, Jasmine's father, Damon Cooper, is not just an ordinary man. He's a prominent civil rights attorney with a history steeped in the prejudice that Mercer embodies. As the legal battle intensifies, Damon must confront his own past, a past he thought he had escaped, while protecting his daughter from the wrath of a town that may never see her as more than the color of her skin. But this is no ordinary fight for justice. When Mercer discovers a secret connection between Damon and his late wife, the lines between right and wrong begin to blur. What was once a battle between a father and a bigoted police chief becomes something much more personal, complicated by grief, guilt, and buried truths. As Damon's quest for justice unravels, he discovers that Mercer's hatred hides a deeper wound, a wound connected to the very person he loved most. With emotions running high and the town watching, the stakes become increasingly personal, and both men must decide what they are willing to sacrifice for the truth. Bitter Lemonade is a poignant and powerful story of love, loss, and the devastating effects of racism, where justice is sought not only in the courtroom, but in the hearts of two men bound by a tragic past. In a world divided by prejudice, this novel explores the true cost of hate and the healing power of forgiveness, if it is not too late to realize it. Main character descriptions: Damon Cooper, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his early 40s with an imposing presence. He has dark brown skin, short graying hair, and deep-set eyes that bear the weight of his past experiences. Damon is a successful civil rights attorney who left his hometown to escape racism. Once a victim of police brutality as a teenager, he vowed never to return. After building a life and family away from the place that traumatized him, Damon is forced to return to his hostile surroundings when his daughter is wrongfully imprisoned. His former friendship with Frank Mercer's wife, who died years ago, holds a buried secret that he is reluctant to face. Jasmine Cooper, a 13-year-old girl with medium brown skin, a slim build, and naturally curly hair, usually tied back in a ponytail. Her expressive brown eyes reveal a sharp intelligence and a spark of youthful optimism. Jasmine is a bright, ambitious, and kind-hearted girl who dreams of becoming a doctor. She is mature beyond her years, but is caught off guard by the injustice she faces when her innocent lemonade stand results in her arrest. Growing up in a loving and protective home, she has never been directly exposed to the racial tensions her father knows all too well until now. Frank Mercer, a gruff, middle-aged white man in his late 60s with a weathered face, short gray hair, and a permanent scowl. His posture is rigid, as if he carries the weight of his authority and his inner turmoil. Frank Mercer served as the city's police chief for more than 2 decades, and his influence cemented his role as a symbol of long-standing racial divisions. After his wife's death, he became even more bitter and withdrawn, clinging to his prejudices. Unbeknownst to him, His late wife had a connection to Damon Cooper that threatened to unravel everything he believed about race, loyalty, and justice. Grace Mercer, deceased. Seen only in flashbacks and memories, Grace is described as a kind and elegant woman with soft blonde hair and clear blue eyes. She had a warm and compassionate demeanor that contrasted sharply with her husband's severity. Grace was the moral compass in Frank's life, and the only person who could temper his worst instincts. In her youth, she had a deep friendship with Damon Cooper, a bond that went beyond the town's racial lines. His untimely death left unresolved feelings, and her connection to Damon may be the key to unlocking Frank's hatred. Key settings: Cooper family home, a modest, well-kept home on the outskirts of town. The warm and inviting interior reflects the love within the Cooper family, filled with family photos, books, and art that celebrate Black culture. It is Jasmine's safe space, but it becomes a place of tension as the legal battle intensifies. Mercer's office at the police station, a dark, cluttered room in the aging police station, with outdated furniture and memorabilia from Mercer's years on the force. Framed photos of the town's history, most prominently its police force, line the walls, reinforcing the town's traditional values and Mercer's pride in his role. Main Street, lemonade stand incident. A sunny, charming street that serves as the heart of the small town. Lined with small shops and cafes, it appears peaceful on the surface, but is marked by an underlying divide between the white and Black communities. It is here that Jasmine sets up her lemonade stand, unaware of the storm that is about to break out. The courthouse, a large, imposing building located in the center of town. Its tall columns and high ceilings symbolize the law and the justice system, but the atmosphere inside is tense and steeped in history. The courthouse becomes the battleground where Damon fights for his daughter's freedom and for the town to confront its racism. The abandoned park, a quiet, forgotten place on the outskirts of town, overgrown with weeds and long abandoned by the townspeople. This was the place where Grace and Damon secretly met as teenagers. The park is a symbol of lost innocence and unresolved grief, and becomes a key location when the truth about Damon and Grace's past is revealed. Jasmine innocently sets up her lemonade stand on Main Street, drawing sidelong glances from disapproving white townspeople. Foreshadows the racial tensions in the town. Chief Mercer approaches Jasmine, questioning her and making her nervous. Introduces Mercer's prejudiced authority. Jasmine hesitates, and Mercer escalates the tension by arresting her in front of a silent crowd. Sets up the inciting incident. Tension builds. The Cooper family learns of Jasmine's arrest, and Damon, though calm, begins to plan his response. Introduces Damon's inner turmoil and protective instincts. Damon confronts the police at the station, where Mercer's arrogance comes to the fore. Damon resolves to seek legal justice. Jasmine is released, but her emotional trauma is evident, and Damon vows to fight. Sets up the arc of the legal battle and the emotional stakes for the Cooper family. Preparing for battle scene 1, Damon consults with a colleague at his law firm, explaining the situation and the significance of the city's racial history. Sets the stakes and broader social issues. Jasmine struggles emotionally at home, silently dealing with her trauma while Monica tries to comfort her. Highlights the personal impact on Jasmine and her family. Damon begins gathering evidence, interviewing bystanders, and preparing to file a lawsuit against the police. Damon's resolve solidifies as he revisits the city's racism. Mercer learns of the lawsuit and becomes defensive. His counselors urge him to settle, but he refuses, seeing the case as an attack on his authority. Mercer's stubbornness puts him on a collision course with Damon. Damon recalls his previous run-ins with the police as a teenager, deepening his resolve. He shares this with Monica, revealing why this fight is so personal to him. Adds depth to Damon's backstory and emotional motivations. The town reacts scene 1. News of the lawsuit spreads throughout town. Reactions are divided. Some support Damon, while others defend Mercer. Shows the divided loyalties and social dynamics of the town. Jasmine returns to school, but is ostracized by some of her classmates, while others secretly admire her bravery. The effects of the arrest ripple through Jasmine's life. Damon confronts an old acquaintance, a Black pastor, who suggests taking a more peaceful approach rather than escalating the legal battle. highlights the pressure on Damon to navigate his community's divided views on how to deal with racism. Mercer speaks to a city councilman who quietly warns him to be careful, suggesting that Mercer's late wife had connections with people who could damage his reputation. Mercer's confidence begins to crumble as he hints at a buried secret that comes to light. Old Wounds reopened Scene 1. Damon receives a letter from an anonymous source containing information about Mercer's wife, Grace, and her connection to Damon's past. Awakens Damon's emotional conflict about revealing his past. Flashback. Damon remembers his secret friendship with Grace during high school. They bonded across town racial lines, but their relationship was never made public. Introduces Damon and Grace's personal history, adding emotional complexity. Jasmine has an emotional breakdown, revealing to her parents how deeply the arrest affected her. Damon reassures her, but begins to question how far he should take the case. Raises the stakes, showing the psychological impact on Jasmine. Mercer, troubled by the mounting legal pressure and town whispers about his wife, begins to dig into Damon's past with Grace. Tension builds as Mercer's fragile emotional state becomes more apparent. The legal battle begins. Damon files the lawsuit, and the first court hearing is scheduled. Tensions in the town rise as media coverage draws outside attention. The conflict moves to the courtroom, raising the stakes. Damon argues the case in court, highlighting the town's history of racial injustice. Mercer remains composed, but cracks in his authority begin to appear. Damon's legal prowess comes into play, but Mercer's resistance remains. In a private moment, Monica asks Damon to consider the potential backlash in his family, asking if it's worth reopening old wounds. Adds family tension and emotional complexity to Damon's resolution. Damon learns more about the Mercer unravels. Mercer begins to unravel emotionally, haunted by the town's whispers about Grace and her bond with Damon. He confronts an old friend who hints at Mercer's own insecurities about race and his wife. Mercer's inner turmoil deepens as he becomes more volatile. Damon has a private conversation with Jasmine, explaining why fighting for justice is important, not just for her, but for the entire town. It strengthens their father-daughter bond, showing Damon's leadership. Another court hearing goes in Damon's favor, and it becomes clear that Mercer's reputation is at risk. Mercer lashes out in frustration in the courtroom. Mercer begins to lose control, escalating the tension. The secret revealed. Mercer confronts Damon privately, accusing him of manipulating the town and using Grace's memory against him. The personal animosity between the two men reaches a boiling point. Damon reveals the full extent of his history with Grace, confessing that they shared a bond that was never romantic, but deeply emotional. He admits that Grace regretted her marriage to Mercer because of her growing hatred for her. This revelation pushes Mercer to a breaking point. Mercer's outburst in court the next day damages his case, and the judge reprimands him. The tide turns in Damon's favor legally. The power dynamics shift as Damon nears victory. The reckoning. The trial reaches its climax, with both sides making their closing arguments. Damon appeals to the jury's sense of fairness and impartiality, while Mercer tries to maintain his authority. A cold resolution is near, but personal stakes still loom. Mercer, broken and emotionally exhausted, visits Grace's grave. He reflects on how his hatred has consumed him and how much he has lost, both personally and professionally. Mercer's emotional breakdown is the culmination of his disintegration. The court rules in Damon's favor, but it's clear that the victory is bittersweet. The town is left to confront its racial tensions head-on, and the Cooper family is forever changed. Damon wins the case, but the emotional and personal costs remain. The aftermath. Damon, Monica, and Jasmine return home, attempting to return to normal life, but the emotional scars remain. Closure begins for the family, but it's clear that they have been changed. Mercer resigns as police chief, leaving the town in disgrace. His final moments reflect on his lost relationship with Grace and how his prejudice destroyed him. Mercer's downfall is complete, and his absence leaves a void in the town's leadership. Damon meets with local community leaders, suggesting that the lawsuit is just the beginning of healing the town's racial divisions. Damon's fight for justice continues beyond the courtroom, creating hope for the future. Jasmine, now more mature and resilient, decides to take up civil rights advocacy, inspired by her father's struggle and her own experience. The torch of justice is passed to the next generation, leaving a hopeful ending. It was a perfect summer day in the small southern town of Willow Creek. The sun hung high in the cloudless sky, and the warm breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine through the air. 13-year-old Jasmine Cooper smiled as she finished setting up her lemonade stand on the corner of Main Street. It was a modest setup, just a small wooden table, a hand-painted sign, and a few jars of freshly squeezed lemonade. Her heart swelled with excitement. This was her chance to earn enough money for summer camp, something she had been dreaming of for months. That should do it, she said to herself, carefully placing the sign that read, "Fresh lemonade, 50 cents." She took a seat behind the table and waited for her first customer. The town's usual hustle and bustle surrounded her as shopkeepers opened their stores and pedestrians strolled down the sidewalk. Jasmine greeted passers-by with her wide, friendly smile, hoping they would stop for a cup. Her natural optimism beamed, and it wasn't long before a few people stopped to purchase lemonade. "Good luck with your stand, sweetheart," one elderly woman said as she handed Jasmine the coins. "You're doing a great thing here." Jasmine blushed with pride. She loved the sense of independence this small endeavor gave her, unaware of the brewing tension just a few yards down the street. Frank Mercer, the town's police chief, slowly cruised down Main Street in his patrol car. At 63, he carried the weight of the town's traditions and prejudices on his slumped shoulders. His weathered face remained fixed in a permanent scowl, and the sun reflected off his thinning gray hair. His gaze caught the sight of Jasmine's lemonade stand, and something inside him stirred, an all-too-familiar discomfort he couldn't name, or didn't want to. "What's this now?" Mercer muttered under his breath as he pulled the patrol car to the curb. He stepped out, adjusting his belt as he approached the stand. He loomed over the small table, his shadow casting a chill that Jasmine felt immediately. Jasmine looked up, her smile faltering. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like some lemonade?" Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Do you have a permit to sell here, young lady?" Jasmine blinked, momentarily confused. "A permit? No, sir. I didn't know I needed one. I'm just trying to raise money for camp." Mercer straightened, his chest puffing out as if he had found the authority he was looking for. "This is illegal vending. You can't just set up shop wherever you please." Jasmine's heart raced. She had seen this man before, always serious and intimidating, but she had never been the subject of his ire. I didn't know. I'm sorry, sir. I can pack up if you want." Mercer shook his head, his hand already reaching for his radio. No. You should have known better. I'll have to take you in." Jasmine's breath hitched. "Take me in? But, sir, I didn't mean any harm. I'll leave right now, I promise." Mercer's face hardened, and without further warning, he grabbed her wrist. Jasmine gasped, the sting of his grip catching her off guard. She tried to pull away, but his hold tightened. "Stop resisting," he barked, and with a swift motion, he reached for his handcuffs. The metallic click of the cuffs around her small wrists echoed through the now quiet street. Several townspeople had stopped to watch, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and silence. Tears welled up in Jasmine's eyes as she looked around, hoping someone would intervene, but no one did. The world seemed to close in around her as Mercer marched her toward his patrol car. She felt small and powerless, her hopes of a simple lemonade stand now shattered. "Please, sir, I didn't mean to cause trouble. Please don't do this," she pleaded. But her words fell on deaf ears. Mercer shoved her into the back of the police car, slammed the door shut, and drove away, leaving a stunned crowd in his wake. The phone rang loudly in the Cooper household, cutting through the peaceful afternoon. Damon Cooper, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, glanced up from his paperwork. His wife, Monica, picked up the receiver, her expression quickly turning from calm to alarm. "Wait, slow down," she said, gripping the phone tightly. "They arrested her? Are you sure?" Damon's heart stopped. He stood up from his desk, his muscles tensing. "What's going on?" he asked, already knowing something was wrong. "It's Jasmine," Monica said, her voice trembling. "She's been arrested." Without another word, Damon grabbed his car keys, his mind racing. How could this happen? Jasmine was just a kid. What could she have possibly done? As they sped toward the police station, Damon's thoughts drifted back to his own past in this town, the same town he had tried so hard to leave behind. The memories of his own run-ins with the police, the prejudice he had fought against as a young man, flooded back to him. He had vowed to protect his daughter from this very reality. And now, it was happening again. The small, dimly lit police station seemed colder than usual when Damon and Monica stepped inside. Damon's jaw clenched as he approached the front desk. "I'm here for my daughter, Jasmine Cooper. She was brought in not long ago," Damon said, keeping his voice steady, though his anger simmered just below the surface. The officer behind the desk gave him a lazy look, his expression indifferent. "You'll have to wait. Chief Mercer's handling her case." "I'm not waiting," Damon snapped. "Get Chief Mercer now." The officer hesitated before picking up the phone. Moments later, Mercer appeared, walking out from the back. His smirk was small but unmistakable. "Ah, Mr. Cooper. Didn't expect to see you so soon," Mercer said, his tone smug. Damon took a step forward, towering over Mercer. "Where's my daughter?" "In the holding cell," Mercer replied casually. "She was selling lemonade without a permit. That's illegal in this town." "Selling lemonade?" Monica gasped. "She's just a child." "A child breaking the law," Mercer shot back. "I don't make exceptions." Damon's fist clenched. He wanted nothing more than to knock that smirk off Mercer's face, but he knew that wouldn't help Jasmine. "You're going to release her now?" Mercer chuckled. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, you'll have a lawsuit on your hands like you've never seen," Damon said, his voice deadly calm. "You're arresting children for selling lemonade? Let's see how that holds up in court." Mercer's smile faltered, but he didn't back down. "You think you're scaring me, Cooper? I've seen your kind before." Damon's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his composure. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." An hour later, Jasmine was released, her eyes red from crying. Damon and Monica rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. The weight of what had happened hit Damon like a freight train. His daughter, his innocent little girl, had been handcuffed and locked in a cell for selling lemonade. It was more than just an injustice. It was personal. "We'll fight this," Damon whispered to her as they walked out of the station. "I promise you we'll fight." Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. "I just wanted to make some money for camp," she said quietly. Damon's heart broke, but he knew this was only the beginning. The battle ahead would be long and difficult, but he would not let Mercer or the town's ingrained prejudice go unchallenged. As they drove home in silence, Damon's mind was already turning toward the next steps. He would protect his daughter, no matter the cost. Damon sat in the living room, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. Monica sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, still shaken from what had happened. Jasmine had gone to bed hours ago, but the house still hummed with the weight of unspoken words. How could they do that to her? Monica's voice broke the silence, her eyes wide and still filled with disbelief. Damon's jaw tightened. "Because that's what this town does. That's what it's always done." He rubbed a hand across his face, trying to keep the rage from boiling over. "We're going to fight this. I won't let them get away with this." Monica's hand reached for his. "But Damon, are you sure? I mean, if we start this fight, it won't end with just Jasmine. You know how things are here. They'll come after us all." Damon turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and the weariness of someone who had been through this fight before. "They already have. This isn't just about Jasmine anymore. It's about everything I've been trying to protect her from. I can't sit by and let it happen again. Not to her." Monica squeezed his hand, knowing that Damon had made his decision. There would be no turning back now. The next morning, Damon sat at his desk, flipping through law books and case files, making phone calls to his colleagues in the firm. His thoughts raced as he jotted down notes, preparing to put together the foundation of their case against Chief Mercer and the town. He called his old colleague, Thomas Whitfield, a civil rights attorney who had seen similar cases in nearby towns. "Thomas, I need your help with something serious." "What's going on, Damon?" came the familiar voice on the other end. "My daughter was arrested, Jasmine, for selling lemonade. Chief Mercer arrested her without any legitimate cause." Thomas paused. Mercer? That guy's still in charge down there? Damn, Damon. I thought you left that place to get away from all that. I did. But now, I'm back. And this time, I'm taking the fight to them. Damon's voice hardened, the memory of his own run-ins with the law flashing through his mind. Thomas sighed. All right, you know I've got your back. We'll go after them with everything we've got. But you know this won't be easy. Mercer's got connections all over that town. People are going to rally behind him. I know, Damon replied, his resolve strengthening, but I'm not backing down. Later that afternoon, Jasmine sat on her bed, staring out the window at the neighborhood. The streets, once vibrant and full of kids playing, felt empty to her now. The arrest weighed heavily on her, the fear still fresh in her mind. Her wrists still felt sore where the cuffs had dug in, and she couldn't stop replaying the moment in her head. The way Chief Mercer had looked at her, like she was nothing. Monica knocked softly on the door before entering. Hey, sweetie, how are you holding up? Jasmine shrugged, not meeting her mother's eyes. I'm fine, she said quietly, though the tremor in her voice gave her away. Monica sat beside her on the bed and put her arm around her shoulders. It's okay to feel scared, Jasmine. What happened to you? It wasn't right. But your dad and we're going to make sure they pay for what they did. You're safe now. Jasmine turned to her mother, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But what if they come after me again? Or you and Dad? What if fighting back makes it worse? Monica kissed the top of her head. We're a family, Jasmine. We fight together, and we protect each other. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Jasmine nodded, though the fear still lingered. The town felt different now, as though something had shifted, and she wasn't sure if things would ever go back to the way they were before. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity for Damon. He spent hours at his desk, poring over legal documents, reading up on cases of wrongful arrest, and compiling every piece of evidence he could find. His colleague Thomas helped from a distance, emailing him relevant precedents and advice on how to proceed. Damon also made trips around town, speaking to people who had been there the day Jasmine was arrested. Most were hesitant to get involved, afraid of what might happen if they spoke out against Chief Mercer. But a few brave souls, mostly from the black community, agreed to testify. One afternoon, Damon met with an older man, Mr. Harris, who had seen the arrest firsthand. I was sitting on the bench, right across from the lemonade stand, Mr. Harris said, shaking his head slowly. I couldn't believe my eyes. That little girl didn't do anything wrong. Mercer, he's just looking for a reason to throw his weight around. Would you be willing to testify in court? Damon asked, his voice steady but urgent. Mr. Harris hesitated. I don't know, Damon. You know how things are in this town. Mercer's got half the town in his pocket. People around here don't take kindly to anyone challenging him. Damon leaned forward. I understand, but we need people like you, people who saw what happened, to stand up for the truth. If we don't, Mercer's going to keep doing this, to Jasmine, to other kids. We have to fight back. After a long pause, Mr. Harris nodded slowly. I'll do it. I'll testify. Damon shook his hand, gratitude swelling in his chest. He knew that every piece of evidence, every witness, would be crucial to winning this fight. Meanwhile, Chief Mercer was sitting in his office at the police station when he received word of the lawsuit. One of his officers, Deputy Foster, knocked on the door and handed him the legal papers. Looks like Cooper's coming after you, Chief, Foster said, his voice tinged with concern. Mercer snatched the papers from his hands, his face darkening as he read. That damn Cooper. I knew he'd try something like this. Maybe you should settle, Chief. This could get ugly, Foster suggested hesitantly. Mercer glared at him. Settle? Are you kidding me? I'm not letting some hotshot lawyer make a fool out of me. Especially not him. But sir, Mercer cut him off. Enough. Cooper wants a fight. I'll give him one. He doesn't know what he's up against. Foster nodded, though he looked uneasy. Mercer's reputation as the town's enforcer was strong, but even he knew that Damon Cooper wasn't someone to be taken lightly. As Foster left the room, Mercer leaned back in his chair, a scowl settling on his face. The lawsuit was a direct challenge to his authority, and he wasn't about to let Damon Cooper win. Not after everything that had happened between them. That night, Damon sat at the kitchen table, his paperwork spread out before him. Monica walked in, placing a cup of tea next to him. "How's it going?" she asked softly. Damon rubbed his temples. "It's going. We've got a case, but it's going to be a battle. Mercer's not going to go down without a fight." Monica sat across from him, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you ready for that? For everything that's going to come with it?" Damon looked up at her, his eyes weary but determined. "I've been ready for this fight my whole life. I just didn't know it was going to come like this. But now I don't have a choice. For Jasmine, for our family, I have to see this through." Monica nodded, reaching out to take his hand. "I believe in you. We'll get through this together." Damon squeezed her hand, grateful for her support. The road ahead was long and filled with uncertainty, but he knew he couldn't back down now. The fight for justice was just beginning. As the night wore on, Damon continued his preparations, his mind focused on the battle ahead. Every piece of evidence, every witness testimony, would bring them one step closer to justice. And though the weight of the past bore down on him, Damon knew that this was a fight he couldn't afford to lose. The sun had barely risen when the town began buzzing with news of Damon Cooper's lawsuit against Chief Mercer. The coffee shop on Main Street, usually filled with idle chatter about local gossip, was now the epicenter of heated debate. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, and the divide was as clear as the town's long-standing racial lines. "They're calling him a hero," one woman muttered as she sipped her coffee, her voice thick with sarcasm. "For what? Getting his own daughter arrested?" Her friend shook her head. "That girl was selling lemonade. It's ridiculous what happened to her. Mercer's been pushing his weight around for years, and it's about time someone pushed back." But not everyone was so sympathetic. Across the counter, a middle-aged man leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Cooper's just stirring up trouble. We don't need outsiders coming in here and telling us how to run things. Mercer's been keeping this town in order for decades. If he says that girl was breaking the law, then she was." The debates carried through the streets, into the schools, and even inside the homes of Willow Creek. People took sides quickly, and while some sympathized with the Coopers, many others doubled down on their support for Mercer. Tensions that had long simmered below the surface of this southern town began to bubble up, threatening to erupt. Jasmine could feel the tension the moment she stepped into the school building. The usual friendly faces she had known for years now felt like strangers. Some of the kids whispered behind their hands, glancing her way as though she was someone to be pitied, or worse, someone to be feared. Her best friend, Maya, was waiting for her by her locker. "Hey," Maya said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "How are you holding up?" Jasmine forced a smile. "I'm okay. It's weird, though. Everyone's acting so different." Maya glanced around. "They don't know what to think, I guess. It's not every day someone stands up to the police chief." "Yeah, well, I didn't exactly stand up to him," Jasmine muttered. "I just sold lemonade." Maya gave her a sad smile. "But now everyone's watching you like you're the one who's going to change things. It's kind of unfair." Jasmine closed her locker, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "Yeah, well, I didn't ask for any of this." As they walked to class, Jasmine could feel the weight of the stares and whispers. Some kids, mostly black, gave her nods of quiet support, but others turned their backs or looked away entirely. It was as if the line between right and wrong had been blurred, and no one knew how to react. All Jasmine wanted was to go back to the way things were before, but deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. Damon Cooper walked through the town square with a heavy heart. He could feel the eyes on him, the whispers behind his back as he passed by. Some people greeted him warmly, with nods of approval or quiet words of encouragement, but others were not so kind. As he neared the local church, an old friend, Reverend James, stepped out to meet him. The Reverend had been a guiding voice in the black community for years, always preaching peace and unity in the face of adversity. "Damon," Reverend James called, his voice warm but cautious. "Can we talk for a minute?" Damon slowed his pace, knowing what was coming. He respected the Reverend, but he wasn't sure he was ready to hear what he had to say. The two men stood together at the edge of the church steps. "I've been hearing about what you're planning," Reverend James said, "and I just want to make sure you've thought it through. This town, It's fragile, Damon. Things like this can tear us apart. Damon's jaw tightened. With all due respect, Reverend, it's already tearing us apart. Mercer arrested my daughter for no reason. If I don't fight this, what kind of example am I setting for her? For all the kids in this town? Reverend James sighed. His eyes filled with the weight of years spent mediating conflicts like this. I understand your pain, brother. I do. But sometimes, fighting fire with fire only leaves more destruction in its wake. You know how this town works. You've lived it. Maybe there's a way to settle this peacefully. Peacefully? Damon shook his head, frustration building inside him. Reverend, there's no peace in letting Mercer get away with this. My daughter's been traumatized, and I can't just stand by and let it happen to someone else. We have to fight for justice. The Reverend nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Just remember, Damon, this fight will have consequences. Not just for you, but for the whole town. Be ready for that. Damon watched as the Reverend turned and walked back into the church, the heavy weight of his words settling over him. But even as doubt crept into his mind, Damon knew he couldn't back down now. He had made a promise to his daughter and to himself. Chief Mercer sat at his desk, his fingers tapping against the wood as he listened to the town councilman on the other end of the phone. The councilman's voice was low, but the warning in his tone was unmistakable. You've got to be careful, Frank. This lawsuit could dig up things you don't want to come out, the councilman said. Mercer's grip tightened on the phone. What's that supposed to mean? There was a long pause. I'm talking about Grace. Mercer felt his heart skip a beat. His late wife, Grace, had always been a sensitive topic. The memory of her was both a comfort and a source of deep guilt that he could never fully articulate. And now, hearing her name tied to this lawsuit made his skin crawl. What about Grace? Mercer demanded, his voice harsher than he intended. The councilman sighed. You know what I'm talking about, Frank. People have long memories, and some of them might remember things you don't want dredged up. Cooper knew her, didn't he? From back in the day? Mercer's pulse quickened. He hadn't allowed himself to think about Damon's connection to Grace in years, but now that it was out in the open, he felt cornered. Damon had always been a threat, just in a different way. I'll handle it, Mercer said through gritted teeth, slamming the phone down. As he leaned back in his chair, he rubbed his temples, his thoughts racing. Grace had always seen the world differently from him. She had been kinder, more open-minded, and though they had loved each other, there had always been a distance he couldn't bridge. And now, it seemed that distance might come back to haunt him. That evening, Jasmine sat at the dinner table, picking at her food. The weight of the day pressed down on her, the whispers at school still ringing in her ears. She had tried to put on a brave face, but the truth was, she was struggling. I don't want to go back to school, she blurted out suddenly, her fork clattering onto her plate. Damon and Monica exchanged worried glances. Why, sweetheart? Monica asked gently. Did something happen? Jasmine shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. Everyone's staring at me, whispering. Some of them think I did something wrong, and others just look at me like I'm different now. Damon's heart broke at the sight of his daughter in pain. He had wanted to protect her from this kind of world, but now it had come crashing into her life, leaving her vulnerable and scared. Monica reached across the table, taking Jasmine's hand. It's going to be okay, baby. People are going to talk, but that doesn't mean they know the truth. Jasmine looked up at her father, her voice trembling. What if this doesn't end, Dad? What if they never stop looking at me like this? Damon leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. It will end, Jasmine. I promise you, it will. But we have to fight for it. You're strong. You've already shown more courage than most people do in their whole lives. And no matter what, your mom and I are here with you. We'll get through this together. Jasmine nodded, though the uncertainty still lingered in her eyes. She didn't know what the future held, but she trusted her father to see her through it. That night, as the house finally settled into silence, Damon sat on the porch, staring out into the dark. His mind raced with thoughts of the lawsuit, of Mercer, and of his daughter's pain. He had always known that this fight would be difficult, but seeing the toll it was taking on Jasmine made it all the more real. Monica stepped out onto the porch, sitting beside him. You okay? she asked softly. Damon sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I just keep thinking about what this is doing to Jasmine. She's so young, and she's already been through so much. Monica leaned against him, her voice quiet but firm. You're doing the right thing, Damon. This town needs someone like you to stand up. And Jasmine? She'll be stronger for it in the end. Damon nodded, though the weight of his decision still hung heavy on him. I just hope it's worth it. It will be, Monica whispered, her hand resting on his. We just have to keep going. Damon looked out into the night, his resolve hardening. He had started this fight for his daughter, but now he knew it was about more than just her. It was about the town, about justice, and about confronting the ghosts of the past. As the cool night breeze brushed against his face, Damon made a silent vow to see this fight through, no matter what it cost him.